In a frozen cemetery far from Los Santos, there is a grave with Michael Townley's name carved into the stone, and Michael Townley is not inside it. The man whose name it carries is alive beneath another name, living beside a swimming pool under the California sun. The body under the snow belongs to Brad Snyder, a robber whose friends have spent 9 years believing a different story about him. One of those friends thinks Brad is writing letters from prison. Another has built a comfortable life by making sure nobody opens the coffin. Grand Theft Auto 5 begins with gunfire and a bank robbery, but its real beginning is quieter than that. It begins with one dead man buried beneath the name of someone who wanted to stop being himself. So tonight, we can take the long way through Los Santos. There is no need to race between yellow markers or hurry toward the next score. We can move slowly through the old snow in North Yankton, the dry roads of Blaine County, the glowing streets below Vinewood, and all the locked rooms where the truth waits for someone to become curious. Along the way, there will be 3 lives, several versions of the American dream, a government war fought by criminals, a cult dressed in pale blue, a mountain covered in signs, a ghost above the sea, and a city that sells happiness to people who have forgotten what it feels like. Settle in, let the day go, and if these quiet journeys through game worlds help you rest, you can leave a gentle like and subscribe before we begin. For now, all we need is the grave, the snow, and the sound of a distant train moving through Ludendorff. The robbery takes place in 2004, 9 years before the main story. Michael Townley, Trevor Philips, Brad Snyder, and a getaway driver enter a Bobcat cash depot in North Yankton, wearing winter masks. Their procedure suggests experience. Michael controls the room. Trevor handles violence with alarming ease. Brad is impatient. The crew forces a guard to open the vault, takes the money, and tries to leave before the response closes around them. Almost immediately, small failures begin accumulating. A guard gets hold of Michael's mask. Trevor shoots the guard. The planned escape vehicle is struck by a train. The route narrows until the crew reaches a place Michael has already chosen for a different ending. Dave Norton waits with a rifle near the road. He is an FIB agent whose career has been unremarkable, and Michael has offered him a way to change that. The arrangement is corrupt, but carefully useful to both men. Dave will appear to kill the notorious Michael Townley and bring an important criminal career to an end. Michael will survive, receive a new identity, and move his wife and children away from the life he no longer believes he can control. Trevor is supposed to be removed from the future, most likely killed. Brad is expected to be arrested. Instead, Dave's shot hits Brad. Michael performs his own injury and tells Trevor to run. Trevor escapes across the snow, leaving the plan damaged but still usable. The funeral completes the performance. A coffin is lowered beneath Michael's name, while the living Michael watches from a distance. Amanda stands among the mourners, already part of the agreement. Dave supervises the fiction that will build his reputation. Trevor is absent because the world believes he fled after watching his closest criminal partner die. Brad's body supplies the evidence that Michael's new life requires. The substitution is brutally practical. Michael does not merely betray a friend. He turns one man's death into paperwork for another man's rebirth. Michael's bargain is often described as witness protection, but it is not the formal federal program he claims it to be. Dave later makes clear that their arrangement exists outside legitimate channels. Michael pays him regularly. Dave protects the false identity because exposing it would destroy them both. The distinction matters. Michael did not enter a clean system that offered lawful safety in exchange for testimony. He purchased a private retirement from a corrupt agent, and the cost continues long after he reaches Los Santos. Trevor's survival creates the danger Michael could never fully calculate. Dave and Michael do not know where Trevor has gone, but they know he is alive somewhere. Trevor believes Michael died and Brad went to prison. Letters apparently written by Brad reach him over the years, reinforcing the lie. Dave is the likely hand behind them, maintaining a dead man's voice because Trevor's hope is easier to manage than his suspicion. Every false letter extends the original betrayal into the present. Before North Yankton, Michael and Trevor had spent years robbing together. Their memories suggest they met during the early 1990s, when Trevor was running freight or smuggling by air, and Michael was already a capable criminal. Their first encounter has the quality of a story retold too many times, with Trevor landing somewhere unexpected and discovering in Michael a person who could match usefulness with nerve. They formed a partnership that survived robberies, prison, growing notoriety, and the changes that came when Michael began building a family. Michael grew up without the wealth his later home implies. His scattered remarks describe a difficult childhood, an abusive or alcoholic father, and early entry into crime. He became good at robbery because robbery gave his aggression a professional shape. Planning, timing, intimidation, and escape turned violence into craft. He could tell himself he was not chaotic. He was a man with a system. Amanda entered his life when she was working at a strip club. Michael paid attention to her, married her, and attempted to convert a criminal partnership into a household. Tracy and Jimmy gave him reasons to want safety, but family also changed the balance between Michael and Trevor. Trevor had treated Michael as his closest attachment. Marriage introduced a home he could visit, but never truly join. The children knew him as an uncle, while Amanda understood how dangerous his loyalty could become. Michael's decision to betray the crew was therefore not born from one sudden fear. It came from years of tension between the life he had built and the life that kept following him home. He wanted to keep the money, the stories, and the self-image of a professional thief while removing the people who made that identity dangerous. His plan was retirement without confession. Los Santos would reveal why those two things cannot be separated. Trevor's past is harder to assemble because he mixes truth, threat, joke, and memory until they become almost indistinguishable. He was born in Canada, near the American border, and describes a childhood filled with abandonment, humiliation, unstable father figures, and an overpowering mother. He speaks of being left at a shopping mall, confined in small spaces, rejected by people expected to care for him, and punished until fear became rage. Some details may be exaggerated. The emotional pattern is consistent enough to trust. He loved aircraft and possessed the reflexes to become an excellent pilot. Trevor says he entered the military and was moving toward flying combat aircraft before a psychological evaluation ended the path. Whether every detail is exact matters less than the wound it left. He had found a machine large enough for his aggression and a role that could reward it. Then, an institution looked inside him and said no. Smuggling let him fly without asking anyone's permission. Brad seems to have joined the older crew later. Michael does not speak of him with warmth, and Trevor's attachment to Brad after the robbery is partly shaped by absence. A friend in prison can remain loyal forever, because he is never present to disappoint. The letters allow Trevor to imagine that one part of the old crew still believes in him. When he finally opens the grave, he loses Brad and Michael at the same moment. 9 years after the robbery, Michael lives in Rockford Hills as Michael DeSanta. The surname sounds polished and vaguely old world, suitable for a man trying to disappear among wealthy people who prefer not to ask how anyone earned the house. His mansion has a pool, tennis court, expensive vehicles, carefully designed rooms, and a view of a city built from other people's aspirations. On paper, he won. The first time the present-day story settles on Michael, he is speaking to Dr. Isaiah Friedlander. Therapy gives him a place to narrate dissatisfaction, without changing anything that produces it. He complains about his family, his anger, his emptiness, and the feeling that he has become trapped. Friedlander listens with professional calm, charges more money, and offers phrases broad enough to keep the sessions continuing. Michael wants a diagnosis that will excuse him, or a revelation dramatic enough to feel like a movie. Therapy asks for daily honesty, which is much less appealing. He leaves the appointment and sits near the beach, looking over a city he moved to because its image promised reinvention. Los Santos is the perfect home for him. It is full of people performing versions of themselves, actors waiting to be discovered, executives calling greed innovation, trainers turning insecurity into subscriptions, spiritual leaders converting confusion into donations, and criminals laundering violence through business language. Michael's identity is false, but the city rarely rewards authenticity anyway. Franklin Clinton passes Michael near that beach without knowing how tightly their lives will soon connect. Franklin and Lamar Davis are searching for expensive cars that belong to people who have stopped making payments to Premium Deluxe Motorsport. Their employer, Simeon Yetarian, presents himself as a generous businessman, helping customers achieve status. His actual model depends on predatory credit, hidden pressure, and repossession. He sells the dream and profits again when the dream collapses. Franklin recognizes that the work is a dead end. He is capable, observant, and ambitious enough to see the smallness of the jobs, but he lacks a path toward anything larger. His friendship with Lamar keeps him tied to the neighborhood and to schemes that are funny from a distance and exhausting from inside. Lamar believes confidence can substitute for planning. Franklin spends much of his early life rescuing him from the difference. They grew up around the families in South Los Santos, in a neighborhood still carrying gang colors and histories, but no longer possessing the power or unity associated with earlier legends. The Los Santos of Grand Theft Auto V belongs to the HD continuity, separate from the version seen in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Grove Street exists, and Green remains connected to family sets, but Carl Johnson's history does not sit behind Franklin's life as confirmed canon. The resemblance is deliberate without making the worlds identical. Franklin lives with his Aunt Denise in a house inherited through the family. Their arguments reveal how cramped the arrangement has become. Denise sees Franklin as selfish and negative. Franklin sees Denise's exercise groups, slogans, and social circle as another form of empty performance. Neither can offer the other a future. The house is technically home, yet both behave as if the other is occupying space that belongs to them. Tanisha Jackson represents a life Franklin has already begun to lose. They once had a relationship, but the death of her brother and Franklin's attachment to crime made the danger impossible for her to ignore. She wants stability, responsibility, and distance from the neighborhood cycle. Franklin hears judgment because part of him agrees with her. His ambition is not simply greed. He is afraid that if he stays, his whole life will become another long afternoon in which Lamar has a plan and somebody else has a gun. Lamar reads Franklin's desire to leave as disloyalty. This accusation follows Franklin throughout the story. Denise, Lamar, Stretch, Tanisha, and eventually even his criminal mentors question whether moving forward means abandoning people. Franklin cannot answer cleanly, because upward movement in Los Santos often does require leaving someone below. The city teaches ambition as escape, then punishes anyone who admits they wanted to escape. Chop, Lamar's Rottweiler, moves between the two men with fewer complications. Franklin can walk him, play with him, and rely on senses the humans around him often ignore. Chop participates in searches and neighborhood chaos, but he also gives Franklin's home life a quiet routine. Long after the early gang schemes fade behind larger heists, the dog remains a piece of the old world carried into the new house. The repossession that changes Franklin's life involves Jimmy DeSanta's yellow SUV. Simeon has sold the vehicle through the same exploitative system he uses on other customers. Franklin enters the DeSanta property, takes the SUV, and begins driving it back. Michael is hidden behind him with a gun. Instead of calling the police, Michael forces Franklin to crash through the dealership window, then beats Simeon for taking advantage of his son. It is an absurd first lesson from a future mentor. Michael responds to financial exploitation with property damage and assault, then sees something in the young man he threatened. Franklin sees a wealthy older criminal who can open doors beyond street-level work. Their relationship begins with coercion, but both are hungry for what the other represents. Franklin wants Michael's experience. Michael wants Franklin's unfinished future. At home, Michael's family reflects everything he refused to address during the move. Amanda is angry, bored, and repeatedly unfaithful. Jimmy spends his days using drugs, insulting strangers through a headset, and drifting through a life funded by a father he resents. Tracy chases fame with little protection from the people who understand how badly she wants it. The family has money, and no shared story they trust. Jimmy's relationship with Michael is shaped by imitation and rejection. He condemns his father while depending on the comfort the old crimes purchased. He tries to sell Michael's yacht, accidentally gets himself captured by the buyers, and later drugs his father before stealing his car. These are betrayals, but they also resemble smaller, clumsier versions of Michael's own behavior. Jimmy has learned that family members take what they want, tell themselves a story, and explain later. Tracy seeks a place on Fame or Shame, a reality program hosted by Laszlo Jones. Her audition is humiliating, and Laszlo's interest in her is predatory beneath the language of opportunity. Michael and Trevor eventually storm the audition together and chase Laszlo through the city. The scene is played broadly, but the fear beneath it is real. Michael built his life from violent fantasy, and now watches his daughter enter an industry that turns fantasy into another form of exploitation. Amanda's affairs are presented as both betrayal and retaliation. Michael has been unfaithful, emotionally absent, frightening, and dishonest about the foundation of their entire life. Their marriage runs on accumulated grievance. When Michael discovers her with a tennis coach, he does not pause to consider the history. He follows the coach with Franklin and pulls a hillside house from its supports. The house does not belong to the coach. It belongs to Natalia Zverovna, the mistress of cartel figure Martin Madrazo. This mistake brings a debt large enough to wake Michael's old profession. Madrazo does not care about the emotional chain that led to the destruction. He cares that something expensive was destroyed and that Michael will repay it. Los Santos converts a marital collapse into a financial obligation, then converts the obligation into a heist. Lester Crest is the person Michael calls when he needs the old machinery of crime to begin moving again. Lester had worked with Michael and Trevor before North Yankton and was deliberately kept outside the fatal robbery. He is a planner, hacker, investor, researcher, and collector of secrets. Physical illness limits his movement, but information extends his reach across the city. He knows Michael is alive and understands enough of the arrangement to recognize how dangerous returning to work will be. The Vangelico jewelry store becomes the first major target. Michael and Lester study alarms, ventilation, security, cases, staff, and escape routes. A gas-based approach can put the room to sleep. A louder approach relies on speed and intimidation. Crew members can be hired according to skill and demanded percentage. Their performance changes according to experience, and surviving workers can improve across later jobs. Crime becomes a temporary company in which competence has a price. Franklin joins as the driver and learns the scale of planning Michael once treated as ordinary. For Michael, the preparation restores rhythm to a life that had become inert. He has a reason to wake early, watch a building, make decisions, and depend on people. The danger is real, but so is the relief. He had mistaken retirement for peace, when what he actually abandoned was purpose. During the robbery, Michael repeats a phrase associated with his old work. News coverage carries the words "far beyond Los Santos." In a trailer near Sandy Shores, Trevor hears them and recognizes the man he watched die. The voice does what photographs and rumors had failed to do. It returns Michael from the grave. Trevor's introduction in the present is deliberately cruel. Johnny Klebitz, once the central figure of the Lost and Damned, confronts him over Ashley Butler. Johnny has deteriorated through addiction and the collapse of the life he tried to preserve. Trevor kills him suddenly, then uses the moment to begin destroying the Lost Motorcycle Club's presence in Blaine County. The scene refuses the dignity usually granted to a returning protagonist. Old criminal stories do not age safely in this world. Sandy Shores is a settlement beside the Alamo Sea, where abandoned buildings, trailers, airstrips, small businesses, and desert roads spread beneath a hard sky. The place is poor without being quiet. Meth production, gun running, motorcycle gangs, conspiracy radio, and military traffic exist beside retirees, fishermen, workers, and people who simply never left. Los Santos sells the future. Sandy Shores survives whatever the future discarded. Trevor Philips Industries operates from this landscape with a grand name and improvised structure. Trevor calls it a company, while Ron Jakowski handles nervous logistics, and Wade Hebert follows instructions with vulnerable devotion. Chef helps with methamphetamine production and violence. The business seeks weapons, drugs, freight, and any opportunity that can be claimed through terror. Trevor wants legitimacy only in the sense that he wants larger buyers to acknowledge him. Ron hosts a conspiracy program and views government, corporations, and strangers through layers of suspicion. In another world, his anxiety might keep him away from danger. Near Trevor, it makes him useful. He monitors communications, flies when forced, and interprets threats before evidence arrives. Trevor bullies him constantly while relying on him. Their friendship is genuine only by the damaged standards of the household around them. Wade's innocence is darker because the story suggests he does not understand how thoroughly Trevor controls him. He speaks of missing friends who disappeared during a trip with Trevor, apparently unaware of what likely happened to them. When Trevor needs a Los Santos connection, Wade remembers a cousin named Floyd. That small piece of information gives Trevor a place to occupy in the city and gives Floyd's life an approaching disaster. Floyd lives in Vespucci Beach with his fiancée Deborah, who is often away for work. He wants order, privacy, and a future that looks ordinary. Trevor enters the apartment, treats Floyd as an employee, and uses his job at the port to investigate a possible score. Wade joins them, turning the clean apartment into a temporary base for men who do not recognize boundaries. Floyd's politeness never becomes protection. Trevor learns that Michael lives in Los Santos through Wade's search and appears at the DeSanta home without warning. The reunion contains affection, rage, disbelief, and the knowledge that neither man can say the true thing in front of the family. Trevor has recovered someone he mourned. Michael has seen the consequence he paid Dave to remove. The children remember Uncle Trevor. Amanda remembers why his presence once frightened her. Michael tries to preserve the central lie. Brad is in prison. The North Yankton ambush was bad luck, and his survival was an opportunity he took after the fact. Trevor wants to believe enough of this to delay the alternative. Their old partnership resumes because action is easier than interrogation. They can drive, shoot, argue, and rescue Tracy without deciding whether friendship still exists. The return of Trevor also brings Michael back under Dave Norton's immediate control. The jewelry robbery has exposed a man who was supposed to remain invisible. Dave could arrest him, but doing so would reveal the old deal. Instead, he asks Michael to perform illegal work for the FIB, now under the pressure of Steve Haynes. The private retirement becomes forced employment. Steve Haynes presents himself as a patriotic public figure and hosts a television program called The Underbelly of Paradise. He uses media exposure to build a career while ordering kidnappings, theft, infiltration, torture, and murder through deniable criminals. His rival agency, the IAA, behaves with similar corruption. Their conflict is less about public safety than funding, reputation, and control over the story told afterward. The first major task involves extracting a body from the morgue to confirm whether a supposed terrorist has died. Michael wakes inside a body bag and moves through corridors where federal secrecy has reduced death to inventory. The mission's strange calm fits his life. He has already attended his own funeral. Pretending to be dead is no longer an extraordinary event. It is a professional skill. Franklin becomes involved because Michael keeps pulling him toward larger work, while Trevor enters because Dave and Steve cannot safely ignore him. The three men form a crew that is not built on trust. Michael and Trevor share a poisoned past. Franklin is still learning how much of the truth has been withheld. The agencies see all three as tools whose criminal records make them disposable. Their talents fit together with almost suspicious neatness. Michael brings measured gunfire and years of heist experience. Franklin is an exceptional driver who can remain precise inside traffic and panic. Trevor is a pilot, heavy fighter, and unpredictable source of force. Lester supplies the view above them, turning buildings and schedules into diagrams. The character-switching structure makes this cooperation visible by moving between separate points of pressure during the same operation. Outside missions, each man's life continues without the others. Michael may leave a cinema or argue at home. Franklin may walk through the city, care for Chop, or sit alone in the house he later acquires. Trevor may wake on a beach, a mountain, a rooftop, or somewhere no sensible person would choose to sleep. These transitions make Los Santos feel as though it keeps them moving, even when no one is watching. The city itself is built around movement between identities. Rockford Hills offers gated homes and luxury shops. Downtown rises in glass and concrete around banks, offices, and construction sites. South Los Santos carries warehouses, freeways, gang territories, and older neighborhoods pressed beneath redevelopment. Vinewood sells dreams through studios, agencies, tourist buses, and names embedded in the hills. Beyond the city, roads open toward farms, mountains, military land, desert settlements, and a coast where the lights finally thin. Los Santos is based on Los Angeles without copying it street for street. Familiar places have been compressed and rearranged so that one drive can pass through versions of Beverly Hills, Hollywood, downtown, Venice, South Central, and the port in a fraction of real distance. The compression is emotional rather than geographic. Wealth can be seen from poverty. The mountain is always near the freeway. A person can leave a mansion, enter a drainage channel, cross a gang boundary, and reach the ocean before the radio finishes an argument. The in-world internet deepens that compression. Businesses, political campaigns, cults, social networks, news reports, dating sites, and celebrity pages all compete for attention. Life Invader promises connection while converting private life into marketable information. Bleater reduces communication to short bursts. iFind organizes the city's scams beneath a cheerful search page. Los Santos is not only a place where people perform, it is a place where every performance leaves data behind. Franklin's special relationship with the city comes through roads. He understands routes, corners, traffic gaps, and the changing weight of a vehicle. Driving is not just an ability attached to him, it is the cleanest form of his ambition. A street offers a visible way out. His frustration begins when the people beside him keep choosing circles. Lamar's schemes rarely lack imagination. He steals cars, arranges drug purchases, attempts kidnappings, and insists the families can regain relevance through enough nerve. His loyalty is genuine, but it is attached to a version of neighborhood life that may never have existed as cleanly as he remembers. Franklin sees danger before Lamar sees betrayal. Lamar sees abandonment before Franklin admits how badly he wants distance. Harold Joseph, known as Stretch, returns from prison carrying the status of an older gang member. Lamar treats that history as authority. Franklin senses that Stretch's loyalties have changed. Meetings presented as opportunities repeatedly place Lamar in ballast traps, including the drug deal at the recycling plant. Stretch's betrayal is not one grand revelation. It is a pattern of situations that become clearer each time Franklin survives. The mission involving Chop and a ballast member named D becomes comic because a human hunt is interrupted by the dog's interests, yet the underlying task shows the small scale Franklin is trying to escape. Lamar wants ransom money from a kidnapping conducted with minimal planning and immediate police attention. Franklin is capable of far more than the people offering him work. Michael notices that before Franklin fully understands what it will cost to be noticed. Michael's mentorship is never selfless. He likes Franklin, but he also recruits him into robberies, family rescues, and government operations. Franklin becomes the reliable son Michael wishes Jimmy had been, and the younger criminal Michael can impress with stories of competence. Franklin receives opportunities, money, and hard-earned knowledge. Michael receives admiration without the history that makes admiration difficult at home. The yacht rescue captures this arrangement early. Jimmy attempts to sell the boat without permission, and the transaction becomes a theft while he is still aboard. Michael and Franklin pursue it through traffic. Franklin climbs onto the moving yacht, fights the thieves, and catches Jimmy, while Michael drives and shouts instructions. They save the son but lose the boat. The event gives Michael and Franklin the shape of a family adventure before either has earned the trust implied by it. Amanda's tennis coach leads to Madrazo, and Madrazo leads Michael back to Lester. Yet Martin is not merely a plot device collecting debt. He is a wealthy cartel operator who has integrated criminal authority into Los Santos' respectability. His hillside world contains security, servants, affairs, and the confidence that legal institutions will not disturb him. Michael can recognize the structure because it resembles the life he wanted, stripped of the pretense that retirement made him clean. The jewel robbery repays the damage, but success awakens every sleeping consequence. Trevor hears the phrase, Dave hears the news. Lester returns to large-scale planning. Franklin receives proof that crime can buy entry into another class. Michael experiences the rush that his therapist could never safely provide. The score fixes the debt and expands the danger. Trevor's arrival in Los Santos does not immediately destroy Michael's house, because destruction would end the relationship too quickly. Instead, he moves into Floyd's apartment and begins finding reasons to work beside Michael. Their arguments are crowded with old references, unfinished accusations, and moments of instinctive coordination. They know where the other will stand during a firefight. Emotional trust has collapsed, but professional memory remains in the body. Floyd's employment at the port of Los Santos gives Trevor access to shipping information. Wade and Floyd are dressed as dock workers and used to survey Merryweather activity. Containers, cranes, manifests, security teams, and cargo routes turn the port into a puzzle. Trevor sees an opportunity involving a mysterious device under military protection. Lester sees a risk with no meaningful buyer. Merryweather Security operates as a private military company with hardware, aircraft, trained personnel, and government contracts. Its presence makes ordinary organized crime look almost nostalgic. A street gang controls a few blocks. Merryweather can deploy helicopters, mercenaries, armored vehicles, and offshore teams while describing the work as security. Violence has entered the corporate supply chain. The Merryweather heist can unfold through an offshore operation or a freighter assault, but both versions reach the same anticlimax. The crew steals a weapon or device whose true nature remains deliberately vague. Lester orders it returned because keeping or selling it would invite consequences beyond any payout. Trevor is furious. For him, effort and danger should produce possession. The mission denies that logic. Some prizes are too connected to power to become loot. The failure also reveals Trevor's place in the crew. Michael and Franklin can accept Lester's judgment. Trevor feels the others have used his plan only to discard it. Trevor Philips Industries wants to become a recognized force, but every larger institution treats Trevor as labor, threat, or inconvenience. His rage is partly the fury of someone who keeps reaching the door of legitimacy and discovering that madness is welcome only when employed by somebody richer. Steve Haynes soon requires the group to abduct Ferdinand Kerimov, known to the agencies as Mr. K. The IAA holds him and believes he possesses information. Michael, Franklin, and Trevor attack an agency operation to retrieve him for the FIB. The bureaucratic rivalry turns a human being into disputed property. What follows is the story's most direct confrontation with state violence. Trevor tortures Mr. K, while Michael and Dave use the answers to identify a supposed target. The methods can vary, but the information remains vague and unreliable. Haynes wants a result, not truth. Trevor later explains that torture is useful for the torturer and almost useless for obtaining dependable intelligence. The observation does not excuse what he has done. It exposes the agency that ordered it, while expecting professionalism to make it acceptable. After the operation, Haynes instructs Trevor to kill Mr. K. Trevor, instead drives him to the airport and tells him to leave. This is not simple mercy. Trevor has already inflicted the harm and uses the drive to deliver his own furious lecture, yet he refuses the final order. The most openly unstable member of the crew recognizes the victim as a person after the agents have reduced him to a loose end. Michael's role is physically removed from the torture, but morally connected. He waits with a rifle, interprets imprecise descriptions, and kills a man selected through guesswork. Distance gives the operation a clean sightline without making it cleaner. GTA V repeatedly separates people across locations so that each can pretend to handle only one piece of an ugly whole. The agency conflict escalates through data theft and raids. Michael infiltrates the FIB building in one version of the Bureau raid by posing as a janitor, planting devices, and later returning through the emergency he helped create. The disguise is humble enough to make him invisible. Executives and agents notice a man with a gun. They rarely notice the person cleaning the floor. Another approach attacks from above and enters with greater force. Both methods treat the federal headquarters as another heist location. Offices, servers, alarms, ventilation, and evacuation procedures replace vaults and jewelry cases. The state has become a target because its information is as valuable as gold. Dave Norton occupies an uneasy place inside this machinery. He betrayed his duties for Michael and continues manipulating him, yet he also protects Michael from Steve's worst decisions. Their connection contains something resembling friendship, corrupted by mutual leverage. Dave knows Michael's family. Michael knows Dave's career is built on a staged shooting. Each man can destroy the other's public life, which may be the most durable bond either understands. Steve lacks that mutuality. He enjoys power most when it places him above consequences. His television persona lets him turn covert violence into a story about courage. He poses for cameras, cultivates recognition, and treats field agents and criminals as material for advancement. The more visibly heroic he becomes, the more secret crimes are required to maintain the image. The IAA is no better. In humane labs and other operations, the agencies handle chemical threats, intelligence, and funding disputes with the ethics of rival crews. Acronyms create distance from the absurdity. Trevor, Michael, and Franklin may be criminals, but the agencies hire them because official hands need to appear clean on television. Devon Weston operates beside this world without needing a badge. He is an investor with interests in private security, transportation, entertainment, and whatever else can be controlled through ownership. Devon uses relaxed language and apparent friendliness to make exploitation sound modern. He does not threaten like Madrazo. He assumes the contract, institution, or market will perform the threat for him. Franklin meets Devon through high-end vehicle thefts. The jobs promise access to a level of wealth far beyond Simeon's dealership. Cars are identified, tracked, raced, intercepted, and delivered as part of a collection. Franklin's driving skill finally receives an expensive assignment. The pattern underneath has not changed. A rich man wants property and asks someone with fewer protections to absorb the risk. Lamar becomes involved in one of these operations and brings his familiar disorder into Devon's polished arrangement. Franklin is embarrassed because he wants to appear as though he belongs at this level. That embarrassment exposes the trap of his ambition. Elite criminals do not become respectable by excluding Lamar. They become harder to see because their clothes fit better. When the vehicles are delivered, Devon refuses to provide the promised payment. He treats the crew's labor as a negotiable detail and expects his position to prevent retaliation. Simeon exploited customers through contracts and repossession. Devon exploits professionals through scale, lawyers, and proximity to government. Franklin has climbed high enough to meet the same scam in a better suit. Devon's assistant, Molly Schultz, manages much of the pressure created by his demands. She is efficient, severe, and devoted to protecting a man who would abandon her the instant usefulness ended. Her final flight with a stolen film reel leads Michael into the airport, where she dies after moving too close to a jet engine. The death is grotesque and sudden. Devon's response centers on his property and plans. The film belongs to Solomon Richards, an aging producer at Richards Majestic. Michael meets him through Devon and immediately responds to the studio with reverence. Movies are Michael's private mythology. He quotes them, imitates their criminals, and describes his own choices through genre. A studio lot lets him walk inside the machine that taught him how a successful man should look. Solomon is fighting to finish a picture called Meltdown while dealing with an unreliable director, demanding star, financial pressure, and Devon's attempt to restructure the studio. Michael retrieves actor Milton McElroy and director Anton Baudelaire through methods no ordinary associate producer would use. The work is criminal, but the goal is creation rather than theft. This difference matters to him. When Solomon gives Michael an associate producer credit, Michael receives a legitimate identity that feels more meaningful than Michael DeSanta. The false surname was protection. The screen credit is recognition. Saving the premiere becomes one of the few objectives he pursues from affection rather than fear, debt, or coercion. Meltdown mirrors Michael's life so directly that even the title feels personal. He attends the premiere, expecting his family, only to learn that Devon has sent men toward the house. Michael races back and protects Amanda and Tracy. The cinema fantasy and domestic crisis collapse into one event. He cannot remain inside the film. He has to go home. Before that fragile reunion, the family separates. Michael's attack on Amanda's yoga instructor, his anger, and the chaos surrounding Trevor drive Amanda, Jimmy, and Tracy away. Fabian LaRouche, the instructor, offers Amanda a language of balance and self-discovery while behaving with his own vanity. Jimmy and Tracy soon find his performance irritating. The alternative household is no healthier. It is merely quieter at first. Michael wanders the empty mansion and discovers that silence is not the peace he imagined during family arguments. His home without conflict becomes a museum of what he failed to keep. He can drink, watch old films, visit Friedlander, or return to work. But none of it answers the absence. The man who once betrayed partners for his family has managed to lose the family without escaping the partners. Reuniting them requires an awkward sequence of rescues and confrontations. Michael helps Jimmy after a humiliating online incident. He removes Tracy from another encounter with Laszlo, tattooing and piercing the host as punishment. He disrupts Amanda and Fabian's public scene. Then the family attends therapy together and releases years of accusation in one room. Friedlander treats the session as another billable event, but the shouting produces a form of honesty Michael's private appointments avoided. Amanda identifies his betrayal and violence. The children identify his hypocrisy. Michael points toward their dependence and selfishness. No one becomes innocent. They simply stop maintaining the polite fiction that one person caused everything. The DeSantas return home under a truce. Amanda asks Michael to avoid killing at the house, a boundary that sounds modest only in this family. Jimmy and Tracy continue pursuing their lives. Their reconciliation is unstable, but instability is more honest than the staged happiness of the opening. Michael has not become safe. He has become slightly less hidden. Trevor experiences domestic longing from the opposite direction. After a job for Martin Madrazo, he demands payment and reacts to Martin's dismissiveness by attacking him and kidnapping Patricia Madrazo. Michael is forced to hide with Trevor in Sandy Shores until Patricia can be returned and Martin's anger reduced. Patricia does not behave like a conventional hostage. She cleans Trevor's trailer, cooks, tends the small home, and speaks to him with maternal firmness. Trevor responds with a gentleness almost absent elsewhere. He does not become harmless, but he becomes careful around her. The relationship is uncomfortable because it begins with abduction, yet the affection appears mutual enough that Patricia continues contacting him after she goes home. Patricia recognizes the abandoned child under Trevor's threats. Trevor recognizes someone who can tell him to wash his hands without humiliation. Their brief household offers him the ordinary care he has spent a lifetime pretending to despise. When he returns her to Martin, he cries and warns Martin never to mistreat her again. Love appears in the only form Trevor trusts, a promise of violence made on someone else's behalf. Michael lives at the trailer during this period, dressed poorly, separated from his family, and trapped beside the person his old deal was designed to escape. The desert exile strips away his image of success. He and Trevor still perform jobs together, including attacking a moving train and recovering valuable cargo for Madrazo. Their old teamwork survives, even while Michael complains about every condition surrounding it. The Paleto Bay score begins because the FIB needs money for an off-book operation. Michael, Trevor, and Lester scout the small town's bank and discover that local police response will be unusually heavy. The town is remote, but the bank serves as a reserve for corrupt officers and other interests. A supposedly small target contains a militarized defense. During the robbery, the crew wears heavy armor and carries weapons powerful enough to turn the street into a moving wall of noise. Police, tactical units, and eventually military forces converge, Franklin arrives with heavy machinery to extract them. The sequence is excessive even by their standards, yet its planning grows from a practical observation. Paletto's authorities protect this money as though it were more than deposits. The payout is reduced by damage and the demands of everyone involved. Once again, a huge operation produces less freedom than expected. The crew has robbed a bank to finance a corrupt federal assignment. Money moves from one compromised institution into another, while the people taking the bullets receive a fraction. Lester also arranges a series of assassinations for Franklin that manipulate stock prices. Targets are selected not only because they are corrupt, but because their deaths create profitable market movement. Franklin can invest before acting and emerge much wealthier. These jobs make the market another heist location. No vault needs to be opened when information arrives early enough. The moral language around these targets is deliberately convenient. Lester can describe corporate wrongdoing, but the objective is profit, not reform. Franklin learns that elite finance and street crime differ partly in timing. If the transaction is placed correctly before the violence, murder appears as market intelligence. Lester's own motives are not reducible to money. He enjoys exposing hypocrisy, defeating systems, and proving that supposed authorities are vulnerable to a person who understands their networks. Yet he also benefits from the same structures he condemns. His anti-establishment intelligence makes him effective without making him pure. Michael and Trevor's relationship deteriorates as questions about Brad become harder to avoid. Trevor notices inconsistencies in the letters, Dave's behavior, and Michael's refusal to discuss the ambush plainly. He knows Brad would have sought contact beyond carefully managed correspondence. He knows Dave's career improved too perfectly. Most of all, he knows Michael is afraid of one specific grave. Trevor travels to North Yankton to open it. Michael follows, remembering pieces of the plan as the snow returns around him. The cemetery looks nearly unchanged, because the lie has been moving while the place remained still. Trevor digs until he reaches the coffin and finds Brad's body beneath Michael's name. The discovery confirms more than death. It proves Michael had time to arrange a burial, identity, and story. Trevor understands that the bullet meant for him struck Brad and that Michael accepted the substitution. His grief becomes rage, but rage is almost simpler than the injury beneath it. Trevor has built his moral identity around loyalty to people everyone else considered disposable. Michael considered him disposable too. Triad gunmen arrive because Trevor's conflicts have connected the old friendship to new enemies. Michael is captured and taken back to Los Santos. Trevor leaves him, claiming he wants Michael dead, while refusing to perform the killing himself. Their relationship enters a strange suspension. Trevor cannot forgive him, but a world without Michael has already been tried. Franklin helps rescue Michael from the meat processing facility where Wei Cheng's people hold him. The rescue reverses their original connection. Michael once gave Franklin access to larger work. Now Franklin enters danger because he chooses not to abandon the older man. Mentorship becomes loyalty only when the benefit runs in both directions. The Triads entered Trevor's life through his attempt to expand the meth business. Tao Cheng and his translator visit Blaine County while seeking suppliers. Trevor expects partnership and learns that the Cheng organization is considering the O'Neill brothers instead. His response is to attack the O'Neill farm and destroy the rival operation. Business competition becomes family extermination. Wei Cheng later interprets Michael as leverage over Trevor. The decision makes sense from outside and fails because Trevor's feelings refuse ordinary categories. He hates Michael, loves him, wants him punished, and will still appear when another person tries to take control of the conflict. The triads mistake contradiction for weakness. In Trevor, contradiction is the structure holding everything together. The O'Neill farm explosion is one of many ways Blaine County's landscape carries the aftermath of Trevor's decisions. Fields, trailers, airstrips, laboratories, and abandoned buildings become temporary fronts in private wars. Los Santos hides violence behind glass. The desert leaves scorch marks where anyone driving past can see them. Floyd and Deborah's story reaches its end off camera. Deborah returns, confronts Trevor and Floyd, and produces a gun while Floyd holds a knife. The scene cuts away. Trevor leaves the apartment covered in blood and tells Wade that the couple will not be available. The ambiguity concerns the exact sequence, not the outcome. Whatever happened inside, Trevor has destroyed the ordinary home he invaded. He takes Wade to the Vanilla Unicorn and assumes control of the club after its manager disappears. The strip club becomes Trevor's Los Santos base, replacing Floyd's apartment with a business where intimidation can be folded into daily operations. Trevor keeps acquiring homes by removing the people who occupied them. He wants belonging, but approaches every door as a takeover. The Vanilla Unicorn also connects Trevor's present to Michael's past through Amanda's former profession. GTA V fills Los Santos with places where bodies, attention, and aspiration are exchanged. Trevor treats the club as shelter. Michael remembers the kind of place where he met the woman he tried to rescue into a different life. Neither man escaped the old economy. They changed addresses inside it. The final stretch of the central story is driven by people trying to erase liabilities. Steve Haynes has accumulated operations that cannot withstand scrutiny. Devin Weston has used the crew while refusing to treat them as partners. Stretch has repeatedly endangered Lamar and Franklin. Wei Cheng has attacked Trevor's business and kidnapped Michael. Each powerful man believes one of the protagonists can be removed without the others responding together. Before those choices arrive, Lester brings the crew toward the score that has hovered over Michael's imagination for years: the Union Depository. It is not a neighborhood bank or a display case full of jewelry. It is the fortified center where immense quantities of gold are held and moved beneath the city. Robbing it means converting the fantasy of one last job into something heavy enough to load onto trucks. The phrase "one last score" has followed crime stories for generations because it contains its own warning. A final job promises that all previous danger can be justified by the freedom purchased at the end. Michael once tried to skip the job and purchase freedom through betrayal. It failed. Trevor wants the score as proof that the old partnership still means something. Franklin wants enough money to stop needing opportunities from men like Devin. Planning requires study of armored routes, security routines, tunnel access, traffic, vehicles, and the timing of gold shipments. One approach uses deception, uniforms, and disciplined movement to make the crew look as though it belongs inside the system. Another creates a more forceful path through the city. Both depend on several crews operating at once, and on the three protagonists occupying different parts of the machine. The subtle plan is especially suited to Michael's sense of performance. Guards, drivers, and workers follow routines because routine looks legitimate. A person wearing the right clothing and speaking at the right moment can move more wealth than a gunman firing in every direction. The crew does not defeat the institution's strength. It borrows the institution's appearance. Gold differs from the digital money manipulated through Lester's assassinations. It has weight. Vehicles respond to it. Routes must account for it. The score makes wealth physical after a story filled with people using abstract finance to escape responsibility. Devon can hide ownership across companies. The crew must carry every bar. Trevor initially refuses to cooperate fully with Michael after North Yankton, yet the Union Depository remains unfinished business large enough to bring him back. He tells himself he needs Michael alive until the job is complete. This excuse creates room for loyalty to operate without being named. Trevor is often most honest when pretending his feelings are practical. The score succeeds, though money cannot immediately be distributed while federal pressure remains. A victory that should create release instead produces another waiting period. The gold exists, the accounts will change, and the crew still has to survive the people who want control of the aftermath. At Court Center, Dave and Michael meet to manage the exposure around their work. Steve Haynes arrives with Andreas Sanchez and attempts to contain the situation. The IAA, FIB, and Merryweather converge until the courtyard becomes a firefight among institutions officially committed to public order. Sanchez turns against Dave. Haynes is injured and escapes. Michael is caught between agencies whose badges no longer clarify anything. Trevor appears and saves Michael despite the grave. He explains that Michael does not get to die before Trevor decides what their history means. It is a threat and an act of care, using the same sentence. Their friendship survives because neither man knows how to end it cleanly. Lamar's danger brings Franklin back toward the neighborhood, just as the Union Depository pulls him toward wealth. Stretch arranges another trap at the sawmill, working through the ballast and using Lamar's loyalty against him. Franklin asks Michael and Trevor for help. The older men come not because Lamar belongs to their world, but because Franklin does. The rescue gathers the three protagonists around a relationship that existed before either mentor arrived. Franklin could have treated Lamar as an old burden and allowed the trap to close. He chooses the opposite. Progress has not erased obligation. The question is no longer whether Franklin leaves the neighborhood. It is whether he can leave without becoming the kind of man who only looks back when he needs something. Lamar survives without suddenly becoming cautious. That is important. Loyalty does not require pretending he has transformed into a different person. Franklin can recognize Lamar's recklessness and still refuse to let Stretch exploit it. Mature loyalty contains criticism. Blind loyalty is what Stretch has been using. Devon eventually visits Franklin with a proposition disguised as necessity. The FIB wants Trevor killed because he cannot be controlled. Devon wants Michael killed because the conflict around Solomon's film and Molly's death has become personal. Franklin is told to choose which mentor will be removed. The people above him assume ambition has prepared him for betrayal. Choosing Trevor produces an ending in which Franklin and Michael chase him toward an oil field. Trevor's vehicle crashes, fuel spreads, and he burns after being ignited. Michael rationalizes the act as removal of a dangerous man. Franklin has complied with institutional fear and sacrificed the person least able to disguise what he was. Choosing Michael creates a different betrayal. Franklin pursues him to a power station, where they struggle high above the ground. Michael falls, and briefly hangs within Franklin's reach. Even if Franklin tries to pull him back, Michael rejects the gesture and dies. Franklin then calls Lamar, reaching toward the relationship he had risked neglecting. The ending leaves him wealthier and emptier, having killed the mentor who taught him how to climb. The third path is called Death Wish on the selection screen. Franklin contacts Lester, rather than accepting the false choice. Lester designs a plan that makes the crew appear trapped, while allowing them to unite against the attackers. Michael, Franklin, Lamar, and Trevor defend the foundry from Merryweather and FIB forces. The people marked as liabilities stop waiting separately. Afterward, the crew divides the remaining threats. Michael kills Stretch, ending the betrayal aimed at Lamar and Franklin. Franklin kills Wei Cheng, ending the triad pressure around Trevor. Trevor kills Steve Haynes while the agent films his television show at the Ferris wheel. Each man removes an enemy most directly connected to someone else, turning revenge into an exchange of protection. Devon Weston is taken from his home and placed in the trunk of a car. At the cliffs, Michael, Franklin, and Trevor listen while he attempts to bargain. Devon offers money, access, and explanations because he has spent his life inside systems where value can purchase an exit. The three men push the car over the edge. Their farewell afterward is awkward rather than triumphant. Trevor names Michael's betrayal and still acknowledges that he wants the friendship. Michael does not produce an apology large enough for North Yankton. Franklin stands between two versions of the future he might become. They separate because remaining together would require a language none of them possesses. Later GTA Online stories strongly support this third ending as the continuing history. Franklin is alive and successful years after the Union Depository. Trevor is mentioned as having moved beyond parts of his old Sandy Shores operation. Michael remains alive as well, referenced by Franklin, and later returned directly to events in Los Santos. The exact moral meaning of Death Wish remains open, but the survival of all three is no longer only a preference. Michael's family can remain together after the main story. The home is still chaotic, but it is no longer empty. His bank account has grown, the film received its premiere, and the old crew has survived. None of this guarantees peace. It gives him a chance to practice a life instead of purchasing one. Franklin moves from his aunt's house to a modern home in Vinewood Hills during the story, arranged through Lester. The new house has broad windows, polished surfaces, and a view across Los Santos. It resembles success so perfectly that Franklin can look lonely inside it. Wealth removes crowding before it creates companionship. Years later, the contract shows that Franklin turned experience into a business called F. Clinton & Partner, a celebrity solutions agency. He works from an office, employs specialists such as Imani, and serves wealthy clients who need discreet help. He has married Tanisha, and signs outside the house indicate a family with children. The future Tanisha once requested, and the ambition Franklin once defended, have somehow been brought into the same life. Lamar remains part of that future, pursuing a cannabis business under the LD Organics name and bringing Franklin into another sequence of misadventures. Their arguments have matured without disappearing. Franklin is the organized executive. Lamar still believes the next idea will force the city to recognize him. The friendship survives class movement because neither man permits the other to become entirely polished. During the contract, Franklin mentions knowing a film producer at the studio, language widely understood as a reference to Michael. The line quietly confirms that Michael's work with Solomon continued to matter. He is no longer only the retired robber who watches old movies in a dark room. Somewhere in Los Santos, he has remained connected to the place where stories are made. Trevor's later path is less visible. Ron mentions that Trevor has gone Vinewood, and later references suggest parts of Trevor Philips' industries were abandoned or changed. This does not mean he became a conventional celebrity. Trevor has always been drawn toward any world that both rewards spectacle and fears sincerity. Vinewood may be the only industry strange enough to consider him employable. The main story leaves several emotional debts unpaid, because a tidy redemption would not fit these people. Michael never fully atones for Brad, or the attempt to sacrifice Trevor. Trevor never accounts for the people he terrorized. Franklin's rise depends on violence and market manipulation. Survival is not absolution. It is simply the space in which another choice becomes possible. Away from the central plot, Los Santos and Blaine County contain stories that have been waiting far longer than Michael's 9-year lie. Some are told through strangers standing beside roads. Others appear in newspaper scraps, graffiti, websites, abandoned homes, phone calls, photographs, and objects left where the responsible person assumed nobody would look. One of the saddest begins with letter scraps connected to Leonora Johnson, a young actress murdered in 1975. 50 pieces are scattered across the state. As Franklin gathers them, the letter reveals the name of Peter Dreyfuss, a film director who killed Leonora and continued living behind reputation and artistic status. Dreyfuss represents an older Vinewood cruelty than Devin's attack on Solomon's studio. He used the promise of art and access to control a young woman, then relied on celebrity culture to let the crime fade into rumor. Franklin can confront him after assembling the evidence. The scattered letter turns exploration into reconstruction. A murder hidden for decades becomes readable only when every fragment is carried together. The crime echoes the real history of Hollywood without copying one case exactly. Leonora's black and white photographs, ambitions, and treatment by powerful men place her among the city of lost actresses who arrived believing talent would be enough. Vinewood preserves famous faces on tours and signs, while forgotten people remain beneath the mythology. Another trail belongs to Merle Abrahams, called the Infinity Killer. He was suspected of murdering 8 men in 1999 and became obsessed with the number 8, writing strange phrases and symbols across walls. He died in prison before the bodies were publicly recovered. Clues remain at his burned home, in the desert, on rocks, and within the Bolingbrook Penitentiary area. The victims can be found beneath the water near the small islands north of Paleto Bay, wrapped and arranged on the ocean floor. The discovery is easy to miss because no main mission requires it. The state contains an entire serial murder case without gathering everyone for an explanation. Water keeps the final evidence after the killer's words have become tourist curiosity. The number 8 appears so often around the case that people have searched for larger connections to the Mount Chiliad mystery, the game's murals, and other patterns. No confirmed master explanation joins all of them. The strongest part of the Infinity story is the piece that is already visible. An obsessive killer left enough signs to become remembered, while the names of the victims remain far harder to find. On Mount Gordo, a ghost appears between 11 at night and midnight. She stands above the cliffs in a pale shape that vanishes when approached. The word Jock appears in blood or dark red letters on the rock beneath her. The figure is Jolene Cranley Evans, wife of politician and stunt performer Jock Cranley. Jolene opposed Jock's plan to leave Blaine County for Los Santos. In 1978, she died after falling from the cliffs. Jock was arrested on suspicion of pushing her, but released without charge. He went on to build a public life and political career. The ghost remains near the place where her objections ended. Jock Cranley's campaign for governor uses spectacle, nostalgia, and aggression. Billboards and media present him as a man of action. The accusation attached to Jolene survives mostly as an old story. Once again, the public man continues, while the dead woman becomes environmental evidence. The ghost cannot be reached through ordinary contact. Approach too closely and she disappears. Look from a distance and the image remains. This rule turns observation into respect. The state reveals her only when no one tries to possess the encounter. Ursula, encountered along a northern road, carries another unsettling story. She asks for a ride and speaks with calm references to death, isolation, and family history. Her destination is a remote house near the lighthouse. Depending on who gives the ride, the encounter can end as a new contact or something more dangerous. The lighthouse itself stands off the eastern coast near Cape Catfish, separated from the mainland by water and rock. It is sometimes associated by fans with Ursula and other mysteries, though much of that connection remains interpretation. Its real effect comes from distance. A building designed to warn travelers sits where the road stops. Trevor can deliver certain hitchhikers and stranded travelers to the altruist cult instead of taking them to their requested destinations. The altruists occupy a fortified camp in the mountains and describe themselves through anti-modern, anti-youth language. Their website uses Morse code to express hatred of younger generations, technology, and contemporary life. The cult consists largely of older men who have withdrawn from society into armed isolation. Their name suggests selfless concern for others, yet their practice involves cannibalism and murder. The contradiction fits the wider satire. A noble label hides appetite. After Trevor delivers enough victims, the altruists turn on him. He wakes within the camp and fights his way out, discovering money that can be taken from the settlement. Trevor had treated human beings as payment, and learns that the buyers see him as meat too. The exchange closes around the person who believed he stood outside it. The victims Trevor can divert include people with very different levels of innocence. Some are stranded and vulnerable, others are criminals, intoxicated revelers, or participants in their own ugly stories. Delivering any of them is Trevor's choice, not a requirement. The cult's law therefore depends partly on what kind of Trevor is allowed to emerge on the road. The Epsilon program is more visible, with a website, celebrity members, public buildings, expensive requirements, and a leader named Chris Formage. Its doctrine involves Kraf, descendants, beings called unsavables, the color blue, the claim that the world is 157 years old, and statements designed to sound profound until examined in daylight. Michael can enter the program after completing an online evaluation. He makes donations, buys robes, follows instructions, delivers vehicles, walks through the desert, and performs increasingly costly acts of obedience. The sequence tests how much inconvenience and money a person will interpret as spiritual progress after already investing. Marnie Allen guides Michael through parts of the process. She previously appeared in Liberty City as a young woman struggling with addiction and exploitation. By GTA V, she has entered Epsilon and speaks the organization's language fluently. Whether the cult rescued her or redirected her vulnerability is left uncomfortable. Stability can still be control. Chris Formage presents wealth and authority as proof of enlightenment. The final Epsilon encounter asks Michael to help move a large payment. He can comply, receiving a symbolic reward and deeper status, or steal the money and fight his way free. Michael has spent the entire story distrusting institutions while longing for one that can tell him why he feels empty. Epsilon offers an answer priced to his bank account. The Epsilon tract can be assembled from 10 pieces after the mission line. Its writing is deliberately circular, mixing commands, contradictions, biological nonsense, and declarations that disagreement proves spiritual inferiority. The text does not reveal a coherent hidden cosmology. It reveals how a system protects itself from questions. The phrase Kiflam appears throughout the program as greeting, affirmation, and verbal badge. Repetition gives members a way to recognize belonging without discussing belief. Los Santos is full of branded speech. Epsilon simply removes the product and sells membership itself. Trevor encounters a different spiritual performance through his mother. Mrs. Phillips appears at his trailer after the main story if conditions allow. Trevor, terrifying to almost everyone else, immediately becomes frightened and desperate for approval. She criticizes him for failing to visit and demands a van full of Deludamol medication. Trevor steals the van and returns to find her gone. He collapses crying on the floor. The game never confirms whether she truly visited, left abruptly, or appeared through a mind under stress. Medication, guilt, childhood fear, and abandonment overlap until certainty becomes impossible. What remains clear is that the adult Trevor has never escaped the child waiting for a parent to stay. Maud Eccles offers Trevor bounty work from a modest property in Blaine County. Her targets have violated bail and fled. Trevor can kill them or return them alive, with Maud preferring capture. The jobs give his tracking and intimidation a thin legal arrangement. He becomes an agent of the system only because a woman with a laptop and paperwork says the targets belong to it. One captured fugitive, Ralph Ostrowski, is found at the quarry. Others hide on farms, mountains, or among transient communities. The state contains broad spaces in which a person can disappear, but Maud's information and Trevor's persistence slowly reduce them. Bounty hunting sits between law and private violence, a perfect occupation for Blaine County. The quarry has its own scale at night. Terraces cut into the earth descend beneath industrial lights, turning excavation into architecture. Los Santos builds upward to display money. The quarry removes the ground itself and sells what was underneath. Trevor also meets Nigel and Mrs. Thornhill, British tourists obsessed with Vinewood celebrities. They ask him to steal personal objects from famous people: clothing, props, golf equipment, and even a set of teeth. Their admiration treats violation as intimacy. Trevor, who has little respect for celebrity boundaries, becomes an ideal guide. The tourists eventually target actor Al Di Napoli directly, and Trevor kidnaps him. What begins as collection becomes captivity. The sequence asks whether obsessive fandom differs from ownership when the admired person is reduced to an object. Trevor can decide how the final drive ends, but no outcome turns the earlier behavior harmless. Tonya Wiggins connects Franklin to a much smaller economy. She asks him to operate a tow truck because her partner JB is struggling with addiction and failing to work. Franklin complains, yet he repeatedly helps. Towing illegally parked or broken vehicles is ordinary beside a federal raid, but it reveals the neighborhood network he cannot completely leave. Tonya's requests also expose how many people depend on unreliable systems. A missed shift, a drug problem, or a damaged vehicle can threaten the little money available. Franklin's large heists promise escape from this fragility. His willingness to return suggests he has not forgotten what small emergencies feel like. Howe introduces Franklin to Los Santos street racing. The races occur at night, when ordinary traffic and city lights turn familiar roads into a different map. Howe respects driving as craft. Unlike Simeon or Devin, he is interested in what Franklin can do, rather than how cheaply the skill can be purchased. Dom Beasley introduces Franklin to parachuting and extreme stunts. Dom treats danger as spiritual proof and social identity. He leaps from aircraft, cranes, and mountains with the confidence of someone who believes survival confirms superiority. His final stunt from the Landak Dam does not include a parachute. Franklin can watch the philosophy reach its natural conclusion. Mary Ann Quinn is obsessed with competition and encounters each protagonist through athletic challenges. She runs, cycles, swims, and interprets almost every interaction as judgment. Exercise has not brought peace. It has given anxiety measurable distances. Barry campaigns for marijuana legalization and offers each protagonist a sample. The experiences differ according to character. Michael and Trevor hallucinate threats and engage in battles against impossible enemies. Franklin waits for an effect that never arrives. The contrast suggests the visions come less from the drug than from what each mind is prepared to project. Michael sees aliens descending around him, turning fear of unreality into targets. Trevor sees aggressive clowns, figures associated with laughter, performance, and humiliation. Franklin remains grounded and mildly impatient. In a city where everyone is selling altered consciousness, the youngest protagonist may be the least interested in pretending the effect is deeper than it is. Omega, encountered in the desert, believes extraterrestrials are communicating through technology. He asks Franklin to recover 50 pieces of a crashed spacecraft scattered across San Andreas. The parts lie on roofs, beneath bridges, inside caves, underwater, and in places ordinary travel would pass without inspection. Completing the collection gives Omega enough material to reveal a small vehicle called the Space Docker. Its lights, sounds, and construction suggest human obsession assembled from alien imagery rather than confirmed extraterrestrial engineering. Omega receives vindication in the form he wanted, while Franklin receives a strange car. The universe does not explain itself. Aliens appear before Los Santos is even reached. During the North Yankton prologue, leaving the intended road briefly reveals a frozen figure beneath the river ice. The body has the familiar thin limbs and large head of a cultural grey alien. The robbery cannot pause long enough to investigate, and the figure remains below the surface while the crew drives toward betrayal. Michael later experiences an apparent abduction after accepting a substance from activists in a Vinewood alley. He wakes high above the city and falls through the night wearing only underwear. The sequence is dream, hallucination, encounter, or some combination the story refuses to label. Los Santos offers drugs, aliens, and spiritual revelation through the same doorway. The ocean north of Paleto Bay contains a submerged flying saucer. It rests on the seafloor, damaged and covered by marine growth, available without completing the story. The craft resembles the saucers seen elsewhere, but does not rise, flash, or explain itself. A mystery placed underwater can remain untouched by the traffic of the whole state. At the summit of Mount Chiliad, inside the cable car station, a mural shows a mountain-like shape branching above symbols that resemble a UFO, an egg, and a jetpack. X marks appear along the structure, and an eye-like form waits at the top. On the back of the viewing platform, a message asks for a return when the story is complete. Reaching full completion and standing at the summit around 3 in the morning during stormy weather reveals a saucer above the mountain. It cannot be approached like a normal aircraft. The image behaves more like a projection and bears FIB markings, complicating every easy alien explanation. The reward for finishing the known story is an object that makes the unknown story less clear. Other sources appear high above Fort Zancudo and the alien-themed camp near sandy shores after the required completion. The Zancudo craft is more physically dangerous and can disrupt aircraft that approach. The desert saucer hangs over painted symbols, improvised sculptures, and the words "Beam me up." Government technology, extraterrestrial presence, and human belief overlap so completely that none can be isolated with confidence. For years, the jetpack symbol became the heart of theories because Grand Theft Auto San Andreas had hidden a usable jetpack within a secret military facility. GTA V's original story mode offered no matching discovery. GTA Online later placed a jet-propelled thruster inside Mount Chiliad during the Doomsday heist, but that addition does not prove a lost solution to the original mural. It does show that Rockstar knew exactly which expectation had been waiting under the mountain. The mural's branches, glyphs painted across Chiliad, weather conditions, X marks, and recurring eye imagery inspired years of tests. Some explanations treat the mural as a guide toward the completion UFO rather than a machine with another undiscovered reward. Other theories connect it to Epsilon, the altruists, government experiments, or multiple hidden paths. The confirmed elements are already strange enough. The larger solution remains interpretation. Fort Zancudo strengthens that atmosphere because the base is both visible and forbidden. Jets cross the sky, military vehicles move behind fences, and entering without authorization brings immediate force. Bunkers and lights suggest activity below the ground. The state does not need aliens to make secrecy believable. Ordinary military power supplies enough locked doors. Far off the eastern coast, an underwater hatch is built into the sea floor. It cannot be opened. Approaching too closely causes pressure damage, and coded tapping can be heard from within. The sound has been interpreted as a reference to Roman Bellic's repeated invitation to go bowling in Grand Theft Auto 4. Whether joke or distress signal, the hatch turns a remembered line into something sealed beneath the ocean. The sea contains wrecked aircraft, ships, containers, weapons, skeletal remains, and areas of deep darkness beyond the crowded beach. Much of this material has no mission attached. The coastline used for leisure above becomes an archive below. Los Santos places its bright life at the water's edge and lets the old machinery sink out of sight. Sonar collection missions make the seafloor economically useful. Michael can purchase the Sonar Collection's dock and help Abigail Mathers recover pieces of a submarine destroyed while her husband, Frank, was inside. 30 parts are scattered underwater. Abigail presents the search as grief and investigation. Once the pieces are found, evidence points toward Abigail's responsibility for the sabotage and the financial benefit connected to Frank's death. She offers Michael a small payment and attempts to leave. He can allow her to go or respond violently. The ocean gives up the machine, but justice still depends on a criminal deciding what to do with the evidence. Nuclear waste barrels can also be recovered after purchasing the dock. The work pays money for locating containers left beneath the water. Environmental damage becomes a collectible economy, another Los Santos arrangement in which cleanup is profitable only after someone owns the right property. The old mine in Great Chaparral hides a different piece of Vinewood history in enhanced versions of the story. Breaking the sealed entrance opens dark tunnels, rails, abandoned equipment, and a body identified as Isaac. A film canister from Richard's Majestic lies nearby. Clues around the city reveal that producer Fred Quincy murdered Isaac, who had been involved with the studio, and concealed the body in the mine. Quincy also arranged the death of another associate and built a career over buried crimes. The mystery ties Michael's beloved studio to an older tradition of exploitation. Richard's Majestic is worth saving without having been innocent. Solomon's office contains traces of that history, and finding Isaac resolves the chain of clues. Vintage visual filters become available, letting the city appear through the black and white style of old detective films. The reward changes how Los Santos looks. The solved murder becomes an aesthetic. Monkey mosaics appeared across the enhanced world as another quiet search. 50 tiled images were placed on walls, under bridges, behind buildings, and in overlooked corners. Photographing all of them eventually leads to the artist and unlocks a monkey outfit and a special compact car. Street art turns the city into a gallery whose entrance fee is sustained attention. Peyote plants alter the world more radically. Eating one causes a hallucination in which consciousness enters an animal. Birds, dogs, cats, deer, marine creatures, and other forms turn streets and countryside into unfamiliar territory. A highway divider feels different at the height of a small animal. The map has not changed, but the body's scale has. The Sasquatch mystery begins during the main story, when a heat signature resembling Bigfoot appears during a hunting operation. After full completion, Franklin meets a hunter who claims to have tracked the creature for years. The final target is revealed as a man in a costume, keeping the old myth alive through performance. Later editions concealed a far more elaborate hunt involving ordinary and golden peyote plants, days of the week, weather, sounds, and a trail followed while transformed into Sasquatch. Completing the sequence can lead to a battle with a creature called the Beast. A joke about a man in a suit becomes a genuine hidden system because the game rewards people who refuse to stop looking. Wildlife gives San Andreas a life separate from human satire. Mountain lions move through the hills, deer cross roads, coyotes travel the desert, birds wheel above the shore, sharks occupy deep water, dogs accompany people through neighborhoods. The city speaks constantly, but much of the state does not need dialogue to feel occupied. Hunting challenges with Cletus bring Trevor into that quieter world in a way that never becomes peaceful for long. Cletus teaches him to shoot antennas, tires, coyotes, elk, and other targets. Trevor's patience with a rifle contrasts with his ordinary impulsiveness. He can remain completely still when stillness is attached to a shot. Cletus also represents the rural culture beyond Trevor's criminal business. Hunting, trailers, improvised work, and suspicion of city life exist without belonging entirely to the meth trade or military conspiracies. Blaine County becomes less convincing when everyone is treated as Trevor's background. People were living there before he declared himself an industry. Grapeseed carries farms, irrigation, livestock, air traffic, and the O'Neill operation. Paleto Bay rests between the mountain and sea, with local businesses, homes, a sheriff's station, and the bank whose reserve attracts overwhelming force. Harmony stretches along the highway, with garages and modest commerce. Each settlement supplies a different answer to why someone remains outside Los Santos. The Alamo Sea is based on California's Salton Sea, a body of water surrounded by the remains of tourism, environmental trouble, and desert settlement. In Gita Vif, it creates open space between Trevor's trailer, the hippie camp, airfields, and distant mountains. Reflections can make the water beautiful even when the shore suggests decay. The landscape does not choose between ugliness and calm. Mount Chiliad dominates the north as both geography and puzzle. It can be reached by road, trail, aircraft, or cable car. Hikers move along its paths. Cyclists race down. The summit offers one of the widest views in the state. The mural attracts theories, but the mountain would feel mysterious without it, because height changes every familiar road into a thin line. The cable car performs a rare service in a world obsessed with driving. It asks the journey to slow. The cabin rises while cliffs pass outside, and the state gradually reveals its shape. At the top, the viewing platform waits for daylight tourists and 3 a.m. investigators with equal patience. Los Santos International Airport offers the opposite transition. Runways, hangars, terminals, service roads, and aircraft connect the state to a wider world that is mostly unseen. Michael chases Molly there. Trevor uses planes as naturally as cars. Franklin can look toward departure without the story ever requiring him to leave San Andreas. The airport is possibility arranged behind fences. The port moves goods rather than people. Containers conceal cargo by making every shipment look identical from a distance. Trevor's reconnaissance reveals how much work, machinery, and documentation support the flow. The city consumes objects whose origins remain invisible once they reach a store. Elysian Island and the industrial districts are filled with tanks, pipes, rail lines, warehouses, and plants that keep the glamorous neighborhoods functioning. Tour buses do not visit them. The skyline depends on them. GTA Vive repeatedly places expensive fantasies above infrastructure no celebrity wants in the photograph. The Los Santos River is mostly a concrete flood channel, broad enough for vehicles and pursuits. In dry weather, it looks like a road the city forgot to finish. When water arrives, the channel reveals its intended purpose. This transformation reflects Los Angeles engineering, while giving criminal movement another hidden route through the map. Vinewood Boulevard is crowded with performers dressed as superheroes, tourists photographing pavement, souvenir shops, old theaters, and people hoping proximity to fame will become fame. The names in the walkways imitate a culture that turns memory into real estate. Trevor can steal objects from celebrities for tourists who believe ownership will bring them closer to the image. The Vinewood sign looks over the city like an instruction. People below are expected to be visible, successful, and desirable. Michael lives beneath it and feels unseen. Franklin eventually moves closer and discovers that elevation does not answer loneliness. Trevor arrives from a place with almost no polished image and exposes the violence everyone else has learned to market. Richard's Majestic occupies a studio lot full of sets, offices, props, trailers, and artificial streets. A western town, urban alley, or foreign location can exist yards apart because cinema requires only the angle that reaches the screen. Michael feels at home there because his life has always depended on controlling the angle. The court center sits above the city with formal gardens, pale stone, and museum-like calm. Its elegance becomes the setting for agencies to shoot at one another. Los Santos architecture rarely protects a place's intended meaning. A cultural center becomes a battlefield. A foundry becomes a defensive trap. A quiet cemetery becomes the center of a friendship's collapse. Mazebank Tower rises over downtown as a symbol of finance, while Mazebank Arena turns naming rights into public identity. Fleeca branches make banking visible at neighborhood scale. The Union Depository hides greater wealth behind fortified procedure. Money occupies buildings at every elevation. The game's fictional brands build a history extending beyond the main cast. Amu Nation sells weapons with patriotic retail language. Grupe Zex transports valuables beneath a security name designed to sound international and slightly alarming. E-Cola and Sprunk compete across vending machines and advertisements. Cluckin' Bell and Burger Shot turn food into recurring corporate memory. Familiar logos make each new crime feel as though it occurs in a world that has been selling things for years. Advertising rarely offers a product without insulting the insecurity of the customer. Cars promise status. Gyms promise moral superiority. Surgery promises identity. Alcohol promises class. Political campaigns promise freedom while defining enemies. The city speaks in commands disguised as choices. Fame or Shame is one of many programs inside that media environment. Laszlo has appeared in the series in multiple roles across radio and television, playing a fictionalized version of himself whose career keeps adapting downward. In Getia Vive, he presents humiliation as opportunity and calls exploitation entertainment. Michael and Trevor's attack on him is indefensible and emotionally understandable at once. Weasel News converts disasters involving the protagonists into simplified reports. Radio bulletins update after major events, sometimes misunderstanding what happened because official narratives arrive first. A heist becomes terrorism, a corrupt operation becomes heroic intervention, and the dead receive whatever motive makes the report fit between advertisements. Television sets around the world show cartoons, political commentary, reality programs, documentaries, and news. Republican Space Rangers turns imperial violence into children's science fiction. Impotent Rage sells a progressive superhero whose private behavior undermines the image. The programs exaggerate the culture watching them, then continue playing while the household argues nearby. Radio is the city's most constant narrator. Stations carry music from different decades, neighborhoods, genres, and imagined communities. Talk programs argue about health, masculinity, politics, spirituality, celebrity, conspiracy, and technology. Hosts speak as though their corner of the culture explains the whole state. Switching stations changes the emotional meaning of the same road. Michael's taste leans toward music and talk that suit an older man, comparing the present with a remembered past. Franklin's stations connect more closely to contemporary Los Santos and the sound of South Los Santos. Trevor can move from punk and metal toward country or conspiracy radio. These associations are flexible, but the vehicles sometimes retain what a character was already hearing, allowing an empty car to carry a trace of its owner. Non-stop pop FM turns bright music into the sound of Los Santos surfaces. Radio Los Santos carries contemporary hip-hop tied to Franklin's city. West Coast Classics holds an older musical memory of the streets. Rebel Radio belongs naturally to desert roads and Trevor's battered vehicles. Los Santos Rock Radio suits Michael's nostalgia. The soundtrack lets generations occupy one map without resolving their differences. Blaine County Radio includes Beyond Insemination with Ron, who describes conspiracies to people already inclined to believe him. Chakra Attack features Dr. Ray D'Angelo Harris, turning self-importance into spiritual broadcasting. Chattersphere gives Laszlo another venue for attention. Talk radio reveals a city that cannot remain quiet because silence might allow doubt. Pedestrians carry smaller stories. They argue by phone, discuss relationships, complain about work, exercise, shop, wait for buses, and react according to neighborhood and time. Construction workers occupy unfinished sites. Tourists point cameras. Office workers move through downtown. People sleep beneath overpasses while luxury vehicles pass overhead. The protagonists are not the only lives in motion. Character switching sometimes catches strangers and protagonists in moments with no plot function. Michael may be cycling, drinking, or leaving a family dispute. Franklin can be caught in traffic or walking alone. Trevor may be in circumstances too strange to predict. These scenes imply time passing outside direct control. A person is not stored in the last place he was left. Weather moves across the map with similar independence. Coastal haze softens distance. Desert heat bleaches color. Rain turns downtown streets reflective and makes headlights stretch across asphalt. Storms gather around the mountains. Rare snow transforms GTA Online's Los Santos during seasonal periods, briefly carrying North Yankton's color into the city Michael chose to escape it. Day and night reorganize social space. Beach is empty, clubs fill, office windows remain lit above streets. Aircraft lights cross dark sky. Desert businesses close while distant trailers glow. The same highway that feels comic at noon can feel endless after midnight, when the radio host stops speaking and only the engine remains. The people available for heist crews add another layer to the city, because several can be discovered rather than simply hired from a menu. Patrick McReary appears during a random robbery and can be helped during his escape. Packy previously survived the violence of Grand Theft Auto 4 and the collapse of his own family in Liberty City. In Los Santos, he becomes a skilled gunman carrying one criminal history into another. Packy's presence helps clarify the continuity. Grand Theft Auto 4, its episodes, GTA 5, GTA Online, and the next HD-era stories share a world. Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas belongs to the earlier 3D universe. This is why Johnny Klebitz, Packy, Ashley, Marnie, and other HD characters can cross into GTA V directly. while references to Grove Street or old brands do not establish that CJ lived through the same history. Helping her reach safety makes an excellent driver available for later scores. She asks for a modest cut despite strong ability, which turns compassion into practical advantage without reducing it to sentiment. Los Santos contains talented people whose careers begin only if someone stops on the right road. Ricky Lukens works at Life Invader and contacts Michael after Jay Norris dies during the company's product presentation. Ricky is inexperienced as a heist hacker and initially makes mistakes, but surviving work improves him. His development mirrors the hired drivers and gunmen who become more capable after each job. Lester treats personnel as percentages. The story lets percentages become people over time. Jay Norris's death is arranged by Lester and carried out by Michael through an explosive device hidden in a prototype phone. The assassination occurs on stage in front of an applauding crowd expecting innovation. Life Invader markets connection, while its founder uses personal data, labor, and public adoration to build wealth. Michael turns the product launch into a public execution and then watches it through television. The mission is presented with dark comedy, but it establishes Lester's reach before the major heists. He can influence markets, destroy executives, and convert consumer hardware into weapons. Information is not support work in GTA V. It is force applied at a distance. Other crew members reveal different levels of competence. Gustavo Mota is expensive and dependable. Chef already understands Trevor's operations and brings experience. Karim Denz begins as a weaker driver but can improve. Cheap gunmen may drop money or die if assigned beyond their ability. The crew system gives every percentage a shadow. Keeping more of the take can mean trusting someone with less chance of returning. Lester's garment factory serves as a planning space because ordinary industrial work disguises extraordinary preparation. Whiteboards, photographs, maps, uniforms, equipment, and crew selection turn future chaos into a room full of manageable questions. The factory is eventually destroyed, forcing later planning elsewhere. Even Lester's safe spaces have expiration dates. Properties offer the protagonists smaller identities after the main scores. Franklin can own the downtown cab company and receive work involving passengers. Michael can invest in cinemas, extending his attachment to film beyond Richard's Majestic. Trevor can operate the Mackenzie Field hangar, moving weapons by air and ground for Oscar Guzman. Ownership does not make the work clean, but it gives each man a daily structure shaped around preference. Some businesses feel almost peaceful compared with the story around them. A towing yard, taxi company, marina, theatre, bar, or vehicle scrapyard produces money in increments rather than one explosive score. Los Santos celebrates the heist because sudden wealth is dramatic. Most property earns slowly, asking the owner to wait. The scrapyard turns destruction into income. Vehicle wrecks become a revenue stream, making traffic violence useful after the sirens disappear. Like the market assassinations, the business profits from consequences rather than causes. The city has found a way to bill the aftermath. The golf club is among the most expensive properties and offers little dramatic transformation in return. That imbalance is part of its meaning. At the highest level, wealth purchases access and status more readily than purpose. Michael can spend an enormous sum to own a place where other wealthy people pass quiet afternoons avoiding the city below. Golf, tennis, yoga, triathlons, darts, cinema visits, races, and shooting ranges reveal what each character does when nobody has assigned a crime. Michael's activities resemble the leisure of his neighborhood, though he carries frustration into them. Franklin favors motion and competition. Trevor can participate in civilized recreation while dressed like a warning. The same rules apply to all three, but they never look like the same person following them. Hangout conversations provide pieces of history that formal missions leave out. Michael, Franklin, Trevor, Jimmy, Lamar, and others speak differently according to the combination present. Old grudges surface. Jokes reveal discomfort. Trevor may remember details Michael hoped were forgotten. Franklin can hear both men describe the past in incompatible ways. Truth in GTA Vive is often distributed across optional drives. Friendship, therefore, depends partly on time spent without profit. A bar, film, game of darts, or long drive does not advance the main conspiracy. It gives people a chance to occupy the same space without gunfire deciding the subject. The activities can end badly, but the attempt matters in a world where nearly every relationship is organized around a job. Michael's cinema visits are especially revealing because he often sits alone before a screen. The films parody classic genres: art cinema, propaganda, and exploitation. He watches fictional people shape chaos into beginnings and endings. Outside, his own story refuses that discipline. Franklin's solitude has a different sound. After moving to the hills, he may wake in a house with few signs of shared life. Tanisha is preparing to marry someone else during the original ending. Lamar remains in the neighborhood. The money and view confirm that Franklin has escaped, while the quiet asks what arrived with him. The contract eventually answers part of that question by giving him a wife, children, business, dog, employees, and continuing friendship with Lamar. The answer took years inside the chronology. Franklin did not need to return to poverty to recover connection. He needed to build a form of success that had room for other people. His agency caters to celebrities, which places him inside the class he once observed from below. The work includes recovering Dr. Dre's stolen phone and unreleased music. Franklin is no longer stealing cars for a dealer who withholds respect. He negotiates directly with clients whose names shape the culture. Upward mobility finally becomes visible. Yet the agency still uses violence, surveillance, assassination, and private access. Franklin has not escaped the criminal economy. He has professionalized it. F. Clinton and Partner resembles the lesson Michael offered years earlier. Planning and presentation can make danger look like a service. Imani, the agency's hacker, updates the role Lester once played without becoming a copy of him. She develops protective vehicle technology, tracks digital trails, and moves through modern systems with calm authority. Franklin's business has departments where Michael's crew had contacts. Crime has become an office with branding. Chop is older in the contract, slower and grayer around the muzzle. The detail gives time a body. Los Santos can refresh billboards, businesses, vehicles, and fashions, but a dog ages without satire. Franklin's rise occupies years rather than an endless present. In 2025, a safe house in the hills brought Michael and Amanda directly into GTA Online. Michael is described as a successful movie producer, older but still living close to danger. Amanda remains beside him. Their appearance confirms that the family relationship survived far beyond the temporary reconciliation of the main story. Michael's return also confirms with unusual clarity that he was not killed by Franklin. The mansion-era story places him in contact with another criminal who has climbed into Los Santos luxury. A man who once hid in the hills under a false name now greets powerful neighbors through a legitimate creative identity. The location is similar, the meaning has changed. Jimmy's later life remains less polished, though references indicate he is finally moving away from his parents. Tracy has continued seeking work around media and performance. The DeSanta children were never given neat heroic transformations. Growing older is enough of a development for a family that once used crisis as its main form of conversation. Trevor's absence from later direct appearances keeps his future less settled. Ron states during Los Santos drug wars that Trevor is gone from Sandy Shores, leaving old assets and relationships behind. The Fooligans occupy part of the drug economy he once dominated. Another group has arrived to declare itself a family of outsiders, repeating the cycle in louder colors. Patricia's later appearance through the Cayo Perico story confirms that her connection with Trevor went beyond the strange domestic pause in his trailer. Sensitive photographs are among files stolen from El Rubio's island and later destroyed by her son Miguel. The confirmation does not simplify the origin of the relationship. It shows that Patricia made choices after the kidnapping ended. Dave Norton survives the main story if Death Wish becomes the continuing path, but his future receives less attention. His arrangement with Michael has accomplished the impossible. The lie remains hidden even after the events around Steve Haynes. Dave's career and Michael's life continue because the people most able to expose them have reasons not to speak. Lester becomes even more central in GTA Online, organizing robberies, contacting criminal talent, and helping plan scores against institutions larger than those targeted in the main story. The online criminal becomes the fourth point of a network that touches nearly every major power in the state. Lester had once worked from a garment factory. Over time, his plans reach private islands, casinos, underground facilities, and fortunes that make Vangelico look modest. GTA Online begins before the main story, when Lamar welcomes a newly arrived criminal to Los Santos. Early missions involve Gerald, Simeon, Martin Madrazo, Trevor, and other figures whose positions match 2013. As updates continued, the timeline moved forward. Technology changed, buildings opened, and later dialogue began referencing years after the Union Depository. This shifting chronology means online is not one frozen week. The Diamond Casino opens. A submarine travels to Cayo Perico. Franklin establishes his agency. New crews take over old spaces. Michael grows older. Los Santos accumulates events while remaining physically familiar, much like a television city that rebuilds sets without erasing the street names. The online protagonist becomes wealthy and powerful enough to reflect the city's satire back at the original trio. Michael, Franklin, and Trevor dreamed of the score that would end need. The later criminal owns businesses, aircraft, bunkers, clubs, facilities, vehicles, and homes, while continuing to answer calls for more work. The final score expands into an economy with no final transaction. That endless accumulation clarifies why GTA V's story required 3 protagonists. One man could embody only one stage of desire. Franklin is the climb. Michael is the arrival and disappointment. Trevor is appetite without the promise that satisfaction will civilize it. Together they form a cycle the city repeats across every neighborhood. Franklin looks upward and believes access will change the quality of his life. Michael has access and discovers that money cannot organize a self built from lies. Trevor rejects the manners of wealth while craving recognition from its institutions. None stands outside the American dream. They occupy different rooms inside it. Michael's deepest problem is not boredom alone, it is authorship. He wants to believe circumstances wrote him: childhood, crime, Trevor, Amanda, Dave, the city, the family. Yet his greatest wounds come from decisions he planned carefully. The North Yankton deal was not a moment when he lost control. It was control used without courage. His love of cinema lets him frame consequence as genre. The old robber makes one final score. The bad father saves the premiere. The retired criminal is dragged back by fate. Movies can make these patterns feel inevitable. GTA V keeps placing ordinary damage around the frame. Amanda's anger, Jimmy's imitation, Brad's body, Trevor's letters, Dave's payments. Michael does improve, but the improvement is uneven. He returns to his family, protects Franklin, saves Solomon's work, and chooses solidarity in Death Wish. He never becomes fully honest about every cost. Redemption here is not a speech or legal surrender. It is the modest decision to stop producing new betrayals when the old solution is offered again. Franklin's central problem is not whether ambition is wrong. The people urging him to remain small often benefit from his reliability. Lamar needs rescue. Denise needs space. Simeon needs risk absorbed. Stretch needs trust he can exploit. Franklin is right to want more. The danger lies in learning ambition from men who confuse advancement with disposability. Death Wish becomes his defining choice because it rejects both obedience and isolation. Franklin does not solve the threat by choosing which relationship is most profitable. He asks Lester for another structure. The young man who spent the opening following badly designed plans finally demands a better one. Trevor's central contradiction is loyalty enforced through terror. He despises hypocrisy and frequently identifies truths others avoid. He also uses honesty as permission for cruelty, as though admitting appetite makes every act authentic. His refusal to pretend does not make the harm smaller. Yet Trevor's response to abandonment explains why betrayal is the one sin he treats as unforgivable. His childhood taught him that people leave. Michael's staged death turned that fear into 9 years of grief. Patricia's departure repeats it gently. Mrs. Phillips repeats it with devastating force. Trevor holds people so tightly that closeness becomes dangerous, then points to their fear as proof they plan to go. Franklin stands between Michael's disguise and Trevor's exposure. He is more emotionally controlled than either man, but control can become distance. His task is to learn from both without inheriting their conclusions. Michael teaches preparation. Trevor teaches that loyalty matters. Franklin's best ending keeps the lessons and refuses the demand to become either teacher. Lamar provides another model. He is frustrating, reckless, proud, funny, and present. He does not possess Michael's expertise or Trevor's force, but he survives because friendship remains part of his idea of success. Franklin's future agency would feel colder without Lamar walking into the office and refusing to treat wealth with reverence. Amanda's position becomes clearer when the story is viewed from outside Michael's complaint. She married a criminal, moved under a false name, raised children inside secrecy, endured infidelity and anger, and received material comfort instead of explanation. Her behavior harms the marriage, but her dissatisfaction is not a mysterious failure to appreciate luxury. The house was built as compensation for a truth she was never allowed to discuss openly. Jimmy and Tracy likewise grew up inside the aftermath of crimes they did not choose. Their entitlement is real, so is the model that created it. Michael obtained wealth through theft, then asked his children to respect ordinary effort without showing much of it. They understand consumption because consumption is the part of his success he made visible. The family therapy scenes are funny because everyone speaks selfishly, and sincere because selfish people can still identify real injuries. Friedlander offers little wisdom, but the room forces the DeSantas to remain present while others describe them. For this family, listening badly is still a step beyond leaving. Friedlander eventually turns Michael's private disclosures into professional opportunity, depending on choices and later developments. He represents the commercialization of confession. Michael hoped money could purchase understanding. The doctor understands enough to market the material. Solomon is one of the few older men Michael admires without wanting to defeat. The producer gives him entry into a craft rather than a criminal hierarchy. Michael's competence protects the film, and Solomon responds with credit instead of leverage. That ordinary recognition does more for Michael than Dave's protection, because it names something he made possible rather than something he escaped. Los Santos repeatedly asks whether legitimate and criminal power can still be separated. Madrazo is openly cartel-connected, but lives among luxury. Devin uses contracts and investments to steal. Haynes uses federal authority for personal advancement. Lester manipulates markets through murder. Solomon's studio carries buried crimes from an earlier age. Simeon's predatory dealership operates in public. Legality describes paperwork more reliably than morality. The police response across the state reinforces this instability. Pursuit grows from patrol cars to helicopters and heavily armed units according to wanted level, applying escalating force with little interest in context. The system is consistent as a mechanic and frightening as a portrait. Once marked, a person becomes the target around which every street reorganizes. Escaping requires breaking sight, changing route, hiding, or sometimes altering a vehicle. The stars fade one by one until ordinary traffic resumes. The speed with which the city forgets is part of its dreamlike quality. A highway can hold an enormous chase and return minutes later to commuters discussing lunch. Hospitals and police stations similarly turn catastrophe into temporary inconvenience for the protagonists. Money is removed, weapons may be lost, and life continues. This rhythm is not literal law in the same way as Brad's grave, yet it shapes the moral atmosphere. Los Santos absorbs violence because the open world must reopen. The three special abilities make personality visible through altered time and endurance. Michael's concentration slows the experience of gunfights, fitting a professional who sees violence as sequence and placement. Franklin's focus sharpens driving, turning traffic into manageable movement. Trevor enters a rage that increases damage and reduces what he suffers, transforming pain into force. Each gift contains a danger. Michael can treat killing as composition. Franklin can believe every road will open if he reacts fast enough. Trevor can survive emotions by attacking whatever caused them. Skill solves the immediate problem while strengthening the habit beneath it. Clothing and vehicles carry similar identity. Michael's tailored suits, casual polos, and old criminal gear move between public respectability and remembered profession. Franklin's wardrobe can shift from neighborhood clothing toward expensive restraint. Trevor's stains, boots, and improvised combinations refuse the idea that wealth should make him visually acceptable. The city allows change, while the characters decide what change means. Their homes record those choices. Franklin's first room is crowded by family history. His later house is open and spare. Michael's mansion displays comfort while hiding payments to Dave. Trevor's trailer exposes nearly everything and still contains secrets in the form of photographs, messages, and absences. A safe house is never only where weapons are stored. It is the argument a character makes about what safety looks like. North Yankton remains inaccessible during ordinary exploration because it belongs to memory and revelation rather than the open state. Snow, church bells, tracks, frozen water, and the cemetery create a visual world separate from Los Santos' sunlight. Returning there feels like entering an earlier game hidden inside the current one. Brad's grave is the physical center because every protagonist eventually faces the choice represented by it. Michael chose advancement through betrayal. Trevor built loyalty around a lie. Franklin is later asked to put another body beneath the future he wants. Deathwish is the decision not to build his success over a friend's name. This does not turn the three men into heroes. It makes them briefly capable of recognizing the design. Los Santos survives by offering false choices: fame or invisibility, wealth or failure, loyalty or growth, retirement or excitement. The best ending begins when Franklin asks whether the offered menu belongs to someone who wants him trapped. The mobile phones carried by all three protagonists become small archives of these changing relationships. Early contacts lead toward repossessions, neighborhood favors, therapy appointments, and nervous government calls. Later contacts connect to heist planners, property managers, pilots, producers, and people who survived long enough to become friends. A name remaining in the phone does not guarantee trust. It does mean the past can interrupt almost anywhere. Emails reveal tones that spoken scenes sometimes hide. Patricia can contact Trevor after returning home. Family members send complaints, requests, apologies, and observations they would struggle to deliver face to face. Businesses reduce danger to cheerful instructions. Epsilon converts obedience into spiritual correspondence. The same device carries affection, surveillance, work, and manipulation without changing its sound. Photographs perform a quieter role. The DeSanta home contains family images from a life that may have felt more stable before Los Santos. Trevor keeps traces of old attachments among the disorder of his trailer. Franklin can use a camera to document mosaics, clues, and the evidence that other people overlooked. In a city built on images, a photograph can be advertisement, memory, proof, or bait. License plates, business signs, wall writing, and vehicle names add jokes that often reveal more than the loudest dialogue. A slogan may expose what a company is ashamed to say directly. A vanity plate compresses a person's desired identity into a few letters. Graffiti preserves territorial memory beneath new paint. Los Santos speaks most honestly when no character is delivering a speech. Even the map changes according to knowledge. At first, it is a field of roads and icons. Over time, locations acquire emotional weight. A jewelry store remembers Michael's relapse. The cemetery remembers betrayal. The foundry remembers solidarity. The sawmill remembers Lamar's rescue. A cliff remembers Devon's disbelief. Geography becomes biography, one journey at a time. This is why the state can feel strangely familiar after the plot is over. The missions no longer pull toward a destination, but old routes retain tension. Driving past the garment factory recalls plans made before the walls were lost. Passing Floyd's building recalls the home Trevor consumed. A road through Paletto carries the echo of armored footsteps, even when only local traffic remains. The world also contains spaces the protagonists never transform. Small chapels, hillside homes, diners, motels, farms, substations, footpaths, and quiet beaches continue without becoming famous scenes. Their ordinariness keeps the major story from swallowing the state. Not every building exists to hide a body or hold a score. Some windows are lit because somebody lives there. By late night, those arguments grow quieter from a high road above the city. Downtown windows form pale grids. Aircraft descend toward the airport. The Ferris wheel turns beside dark water, where Haynes once performed for cameras. Traffic follows the freeway through neighborhoods that do not share the same dream. Farther north, the lights become scattered. The Alamo Sea holds the moon in broken reflections. Ron's radio signal travels across trailers and empty lots. The hippie camp waits beneath a saucer that may be alien, military, projected, or all three inside the same joke. Nothing approaches the ground. Mount Gordo stands above the eastern coast. For 1 hour before midnight, Jolene's pale figure may remain on the cliff, while anyone curious enough keeps a respectful distance. The lighthouse continues turning beyond her. Jock's billboards will eventually fade. The mountain remembers without needing a campaign. Under the ocean, the old saucer rests among weeds and silt. The submarine pieces have settled unless someone chooses to gather them. The sealed hatch keeps its tapping. Merle Abrahams's victims remain beneath cold northern water, beyond the words he left on walls. Depth makes every human claim sound smaller. At Richard's Majestic, a set may be empty after filming. Painted walls wait under work lights. Michael's credit remains attached to Meltdown, and by later years he has become a producer rather than a man pretending to be retired. The screen he once watched from the dark has made room for his name. Franklin's office may finally be quiet. Imani's equipment remains ready. Chop sleeps more than he once did. Lamar's next plan can wait until morning. A house in the hills holds a family Tanisha once believed Franklin's life could never safely support. Trevor is harder to place. Perhaps he is in Vinewood, somewhere between an argument and an opportunity. Perhaps he is flying. Perhaps he has found another temporary business with a name too large for its building. The uncertainty suits him better than a retirement photograph ever could. And beneath the snow in North Yankton, Brad still lies beneath Michael's old name. The lie was uncovered, but the stone remains, a marker for the person Michael stopped being and the person Brad was prevented from becoming. Graves do not correct their own inscriptions. Los Santos keeps moving because cities rarely pause for private understanding. The first delivery trucks enter downtown. Night workers clean rooms that will be crowded again. A cab waits at a light. Sprinklers begin across expensive lawns. Somewhere, a radio host is still speaking to anyone awake. There is no final score left to plan tonight. No agency is calling, no crew is waiting beside a whiteboard, and no grave needs to be opened before morning. The gold can remain behind steel, the UFO can remain above the clouds, the roads know where they go without being watched. So let the city settle into distance now. Let Rockford Hills become a handful of warm windows. Let sandy shores become a thin line beside dark water, and let Mount Chiliad lose its symbols in the night. Michael's old film can keep playing without us. Franklin can take the long road home. Trevor's aircraft can become one small light moving beyond the desert. The freeway grows quieter. The ocean keeps the things placed beneath it. Snow gathers around a stone with the wrong name, and far away the sun has not yet reached Los Santos. Nothing more needs solving. Rest now, while the state turns gently toward morning. Good night, and sleep well.